Welcome to the pilot episode of I'm Spiritual But. I am Ann Scottlin, and this is my wonderful co-host, Dr. Roger Leslie. Hi, Roger.
Hey, Ann, how are you today?
I am great. I want to introduce you all to each of us, and then we'll tell you more about why this show is, why it's here, what prompted us to have this conversation now in this global reality we find ourselves in today. So first of all, I just want to briefly introduce Roger. Roger, aside from being one of my most beautiful friends in the world, is an incredible world-renowned speaker. He's an author of many books, a teacher, an academic. He's been a librarian. So if you love books at all, you'll love Roger so much. But most importantly, he just has an incredible heart for humanity, an incredible love for the spiritual world, whatever that is to him, and is what brought us together here to have this inclusive conversation about spirituality. So thanks for being here, Roger.
Thank you, Ann. And I'd like to introduce everyone to you too, Ann. So, in the time that we have been friends, you have ignited such a spark of joy and enthusiasm and love of life that is just contagious. When I think of you as the turbocharged engine that moves everything forward. But what impresses me most about you, Ann, is that engine is solar powered. You are using your spiritual light to move through this life, to make decisions, and to do what it is you feel called to do. As a result, you have been a best-selling author. You are a best-selling author. You are a Hollywood actress. And you have dedicated your life to making sure people are settled and enthusiastic and inspired for their own emotional wellness. I love that about you. Soon after we first met, you sent me your wonderful book about joy, and I thought joy is the perfect word for you. That sums it up.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Roger. I really appreciate that deeply. You know, I just love you so much. And this is really what brought this show about was an effort of love for each other and for the people we've met. And we're going to just tell you here for a minute about why the show is and what the purpose is. And then we're going to tell you a little bit more about both of our background stories, what's our spiritual journey been and what brought us here. So I'm Spiritual But is a show about inclusive spirituality. It's going to be a talk show. So because this is our pilot show, this is the only one where it's likely going to be just Roger and me. We have an amazing line of guests lined up to come in and share with you about their personal journey. And the purpose is, Roger, to reach out to people who either are religious but are looking to heighten their spiritual experience, or they're not religious at all, but they don't want to miss out on their spiritual experience. And it's very much about drawing in a space for everyone to have this conversation in a non-judgmental and inclusive space, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And part of that too is I believe that we'll be introducing guests who are non-spiritual, consider themselves non-spiritual at all, but their philosophy or their perspective on life can enhance anyone's journey, whether they define it as spiritual or not.
Yes, and that's what's so amazing. And, you know, any of my followers who may be watching today from Twitter, they know that for years and years I've written about sort of spiritual philosophy without religion, but philosophy of wellness, of nature, of moving forward, of aligning with your true self or with your higher power, whatever you want to call that. So this is kind of just a new extension for me. And I know for you, because you've published several books about spirituality already.
Yes. I publish books in all different genres, but that's the one that really resonates with me most. The self-help and the spiritual books are the ones. And actually, it was my book, Divine Destiny, that I think created the link between us that started all of this.
Yes, actually it did. In fact, I was reading that just this morning, as you know, because I sent you a message. Wonderful book, Divine Destiny. Basically a conversation with God. So fabulous. So the mission of this show, I'm Spiritual But, is, two or three folds. First of all, this is meant to be a very inclusive space. We would love to make this a very listener interactive show. We have able to have a live chat here. We can at least pick from the comments you send in during the live show and post them. And so please, when you can tune in live now and going forward, we really love that because we want to see what you want and what's feeding you and what you need. And of course, you can also reach out to us on our website or email, which is in the notes. So, and then, the real vision is, I love what Roger said. He said, is to reflect the light of every viewer so they live their dreams more fully and trust their own spiritual path more profoundly. I really love that. I just really love that. Finding the joy in your own spiritual experience, in your own individual, unique relationship is part of what I am so excited this show to be about. Because you know what? If we were all meant to be cookie cutters, we would have been made cookie cutters. We would have been made robots. But as each of us has a different voice and a different body and a different soul and a different spirit and different talents, we also have a different way of relating to our spirituality. Don't you think?
Yes. And as such, when we interact with people, we're meeting people, but they're not strangers. They are people that we know at some level, and they are a reflection of us. And that's why I like that idea of the philosophy and the mission statement that we created, because I don't know that we can share anything that everybody doesn't already know or feel at some level. We're just here to talk about it and remind them and encourage them to keep exploring in deeper and higher ways.
Yes, which brings me to our quote. So I'm excited to tell you about this, everybody. So we're going to start each show every week with a special quote. And usually that's going to be from famous people or from the guests that we're going to have or from literature. But this week's quote was selected by Roger and me because it's by Roger. And so because it's our introduction show, we thought we'd share this with you because the quote each week is going to set the tone for the show. And so I'm going to read this to you now, this quote. He says, "Every person in your life represents a piece of your soul. How you treat them is how you're treating your spirit." I'm just going to say it again because it's so beautiful. Every person in your life represents a piece of your soul. How you treat them is how you're treating your spirit. That is so beautiful, Roger. What inspired you to write this?
To be honest with you, Anne, I'm sure this show inspired me because this is how it happened. I was standing in the kitchen and the idea just came to me. It wasn't part of any book that I'm writing right now. I'm writing multiple books, but this didn't feel like it was a fit. But something just resonated and I just wrote it down and I jotted it down on a little scratch sheet of paper. And then later that same day, you and I had an online meeting, and you asked me, well, what do we want to start our first quotation to be? I looked down and that tablet was right in front of me. And I said, well, let's try this one.
That's perfect. I absolutely love that. We have a couple comments. Thank you guys for commenting. Heather Grant says, "I love this quote." Thank you so much, Heather. And we have another one from Dr. Lyman Montgomery. "Glad you're here, Dr. Lyman. I'm excited about this show. Much needed." Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So, Roger, I think we both talked about sharing a little bit about what brought us to this place, why we feel like this conversation is important because of our own personal spiritual experience. And I haven't even really heard in one space your story about your spiritual life and background. So would you share that with us?
Yes, I will, Anne. But primarily, I'm going to focus on one particular element of my
Okay.
journey and one story because I love stories. And I think people remember stories more than anything. So then rather than give you an overview, I can tell you that my spiritual journey started when I was a child. I was raised in a religious household. My parents encouraged us to go to church, and we did. And I went to a parochial school and everything. But I always sensed that for some reason I wasn't a good fit. And it created a huge spiritual struggle for me that I actually ended up writing a memoir about that will be forthcoming. My book, Light Come Out of the Closet, will be coming out in June. And that really traces the early part of my journey. But what I want to talk about to you today is the story. And this is a story, as an author and a publisher and a writing coach, I teach a lot of writing classes and I share a lot of information about my writing dream. I knew I wanted to be a writer since the time I was 13 years old. The idea just struck me. I knew that's what I wanted to do. I did everything I knew to do to be an author. I had a dream of writing novels, of writing fiction books and getting those published. I had the dream when I was 13, and up until my early 30s, I did not have any books published. I was having some success with articles related to my teaching career and my librarianship, but I hadn't had that big break. So part of my goal to make sure that I could be the best I could is I kept learning as much as I could and being as involved as I could. I got a master's degree in creative writing. And as soon as I finished that master's degree, I said, okay, this is it. No more school. I am going to dedicate all my evenings and weekends to writing and getting published. That very week, I received a phone call in my classroom from my department chair, and she said, Roger, the librarian at my school is retiring. The principal came up to me today and said, who do you think would be a good replacement for her? She said, I don't know why your name popped out of my mouth, but there it was. And I told him you. He wants you to go talk to him now. Well, I knew by that time in my spiritual journey, when things that seem so coincidental just happened, like my name just popped out of her mouth, I thought, okay, something's going on here. But before I met with the principal, I reminded God, I was telling God, remember my goal now. I want to write and get published. So I went and visited with the principal, and he told me that he wanted to offer me the job. And I said, well, my dream is to be a writer. So I don't think I want to change careers at this point. I want to spend my evenings writing. And he said, well, Roger, you realize that if you're in the library and not teaching English, you won't have nearly as many essays to grade in the evening and you'll have more time to write. And I said, well, okay, that's a good point. I said, well, let me think about it. And he said, you have a master's degree, don't you? I had just received the degree months earlier. And I said, yes, I do. And he said, I think with that master's degree, I can put you on emergency certification and I can give you the job immediately. He said, let me check with administration. I'll get back with you tomorrow. That night, I went home, and during my prayer time, I said, God, you're not listening to me. I'm clear about what I want. I want to be a published author. I went back to the principal. I got the job. I said, I don't get it. I don't understand it spiritually, but I'm going to go do this. So I was immediately that summer, I started my classes at U of H Clear Lake in library science. I only needed certification. I didn't need a whole other degree, but I needed 18 hours of certification. So when I got to U of H Clear Lake, I met two women who ran this program, Dr. Maureen White and Dr. Pat, Dr. Pat Wilson. Sorry, Pat. And through them, everything started changing. I had a children's lit class with Dr. White. She saw the reviews I wrote for the children's assignment that I had, and she said, why don't you just pick out 3 and I'll send them to Booklist to see if I can get you hired as a reviewer. Or for those of you who don't know the book world or the librarian world, Booklist is the review journal published by the American Library Association. It is the main resource librarians use to order books. In those reviews, all of them include a byline that says the author of the book. So in October, I picked a few of those reviews, gave them to Dr. White, and she sent them into Booklist. Never heard anything. I thought, well, that was very sweet, but nothing happened. In February, I opened my front door. There was a box. In the box was a stack of 8 galley proofs of books, forthcoming books, with a note. Welcome to Booklist. Glad you're here. Here's how many words your review needs to be. This is when they're due. This is how much you're going to make per review. Phenomenal. I was suddenly being published 7 times every other week in a national publication. It gets better. Dr. Wilson called me after class one day and she said, I've got a writing idea for you. I thought she was going to ask me to write an article for a library magazine or something. She said, I had written a book several years ago about creating programs for kids in libraries, and it's gone out of print. The publisher contacted me and said they would like me to do an updated version. It's too much work for one person. Would you co-author a book with me? I immediately said yes. At our first meeting, when we put together the proposal for the publisher, we realized my background was in secondary education. Her background was in elementary. We didn't have one book, we had 3 books. Within months of my accepting that job, which sent me back to school, which I was sure I didn't want to do, I met 2 women who launched my career because I was being published bi-weekly in a national magazine, and I had a 3-book deal with one of the biggest, most respected publishers in the country.
Nice.
What I realized, and that's the part of the story that I share with writers, aspiring writers, that it's going to happen. Everything's going to fall into place. And you probably have good Hollywood stories about the big break and how it happens and how that all falls in place. But I realized in preparing for this show that Maureen White and Pat Wilson were part of my spiritual journey. They were the lights. They were the angels that I needed to connect with to make my dream come true. I was working so hard on my own, doing everything I knew, writing, sending out to publishers, going to school, learning everything I could. The piece that was missing was the connection I needed with other souls who so effortlessly just said, here, give me some reviews. I'll send them in for you. And when Pat was offered the job for the book, she was just like, oh, well, let me just ask Roger. It's too much trouble for me to do this alone. Thanks to them, they are my angels who gave me my big break and transformed my life from the dream of being a writer to being a writer.
That is so beautiful. That is so beautiful that you see these incredible people who came into your life at just the right time as part of your spiritual experience. And I can say that as well about people in my life. Some of you are watching right now and you know who you are, who are part of my spiritual experience. How profound that is. And to really understand that we're not alone and that we're all connected. And that your spiritual communication doesn't always have to be a bright light and a boom in the sky. It can be other people bringing you something amazing that is meant just for you. So that really boosted your spiritual experience then.
It was the transforming moment because I realized that although I thought my prayer work and my spiritual journey was all about my relationship with what I understood as God, and it was just the 2 of us doing everything together, I realized it was the community of people that I am connected to that make that possible. And so I had no way of knowing that when my department chairperson called me to tell me the principal was going to offer me the job, only 4 years later, my husband Jerry and I would be planning and creating her funeral. This was near the end of her life. She was not sick yet. We had no idea. I had no idea that these people would then be my responsibility to uplift and take care of. And that was one thing that happened with my department chairperson, Diane Duskin. She passed away. She died of cancer just 4 years later. And her daughter, her only surviving relative, came to Jerry and me, Jerry's a minister, and said, would you plan and do the funeral? So we were the ones who did it all. So it's reciprocal, it's cyclical, it's mutually supportive at all times. Did I think another thing of it? Did I think, well, I owed her something? No, it was just the right thing to do. I just felt it in my soul. It's the right thing to do. It's an absolute yes. And I think the same thing happened with Maureen and Pat and Mr. Banda, my principal, and Diane. They just said yes to something, not necessarily even feeling like it needed to be a spiritual experience. It was for me, but they're part of it, and they didn't even have to have a spiritual relation to what I was doing or my goal. They didn't know my dream necessarily, but it all tied in, and they were there to support me in their way.
And that, taking care of the funeral for your dear friend, and is very much in keeping with, the principal passing of the mantle, right? We don't have to be prophets necessarily pass the mantle on. And it's the same principle, because spirituality and love and joy are all connected, and everyone knows that I've talked about joy for a very long time. And I always say the same thing too about joy. And it's the same for this, that when you give it, you receive it. And the more you give, the more you receive. And, with joy, even if you're not feeling joyful that day, if you make an intention to bring joy to someone else's life, you receive joy. And it's that same thing, knowing that we're all part of something bigger. If nothing else, we're all part of this big family here on earth. And this show and what you and I both work on individually is so much about finding our commonalities with each other in a global sense, individually and globally,
Yes.
as opposed to so many other shows which are out there doing their own work in a special way, but looking for the differences and the divisions and,
Yes.
being right. I'm kind of over being right, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But
Well,
this show is not about being right.
and I wanted to share also on to kind of piggyback on what you just said, Anne. For me, I had a spiritual context to how I understood what happened. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. That's just worked for me. Some people call it spirituality. Some people just call it fate. Some people call it luck. Some people call it, this is my path. This is what I want to do. I'm determined to do this, and I made it happen. However we call it, however we frame it, I think it's the same concept. It's just a different type of understanding. So for me, I like the idea of a spiritual journey because that's a context that I relate to. If other people feel, well, there was nothing spiritual about that, I agree with them completely. For them, they may not see any spiritual connection. For me, it's a great context. For others, if they have another way to frame it, that's equally perfect. There isn't a right or wrong way to perceive anything.
And you guys, can you see why I love this man and I wanted to do this show with him? Because the world just so much needs love and openness and support and encouragement and inclusiveness right now. And I feel like the time is right for this show, for this conversation. We're so excited to engage, to have guests on throughout all the subsequent weeks, and to hear from you all as well with your thoughts, ideas, suggestions. Even if you have a speaker for the show that you think would be a great fit, please pass it on or send us an introductory email. You have our website and email in the notes. We have a few more people saying they love the quote. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate that. Karen, loving it. Thank you so much, Karen. And Deborah Wilson, such a powerful quote, which brings forth such profound truth and healing. Thank you. And if you tuned in late, the quote by Dr. Rogers Leslie is, every person in your life represents a piece of your soul. How you treat them is how you're treating your spirit. Every person in your life represents a piece of your soul. How you treat them is how you're treating their spirit. And this, again, is, what we're going to have a quote each week and kind of center it around that. Well, thank you for sharing your story, Roger. It's just incredible. And I got excited just listening to even the pieces I'd heard before, because it just reminds me so much how we can even keep our minds open to the people in our lives who are bringing us that blessing that we're meant to have.
Yes.
So I'll briefly share my spiritual journey, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that in the context. So just to introduce you all to our stories, we wanted you to get to know us before we have the guests on, and then we're going to be focusing on their stories. So, so my spiritual journey was also very unique, of course. I grew up in a very unusual, kind of extreme, I think is fair to say, religious environment, kind of a right-wing experience, Protestant experience. I lived way out in the country. I was homeschooled till I was about almost 16. We were working the land, growing our own food, preparing for the end of the world, and really knew that our life's purpose was to pretty much be a missionary or a martyr. And I don't say that lightly. And by that, I mean, like, for real, like psychologically preparing to support what we really believed in. And, it was a very sheltered world, which had some beautiful benefits. One of those was that I really became close to nature, which still is a huge part of my spiritual experience. I always say nature is my cathedral. Some of you have seen me tweet that before. The ability, I didn't have exposure to television, to movies, to fiction, to radio, to any pop culture whatsoever. So I was literally be 8 years old and I'd be looking at the frost on the edge of leaves. It's kind of that young childhood wonder when you're really young and you're kind of like just amazed by how beautiful a flower is, or you're just kind of gazing at it like, wow, that's just amazing. Kind of developed that beautiful spiritual gift of seeing things for the first time. And I still do. Yesterday, I was out cross-country skiing in the snow, and I was looking at, how the snow had clung to the branches and little leaves. And I still notice that. And it brings me so much peace. So the real gift of my childhood was twofold. One was I did have a very abundant and real spiritual experience. It was very different from what I have now. But it was there. It was personal. I believe it was very real because that's what I understood and how I was tuning in. And also, so I knew how going forward, what it would feel like to have a spiritual experience, if that makes any sense. And then also really falling in love with nature. So that was the first part of my story. And then, the second time is really about how I transitioned into the real world. That was a slow, challenging transition. I ended up going to a very tiny conservative religious high school that had like 60 students. After that, I went to a liberal arts college, but basically a Bible college in the South. And, as I sort of eased out into the real world, I went to school for the first time when I was 16. The world was a very harsh place. And I realized that I had developed a very sensitive spirit. Maybe that was inherited, but also just sort of that intimate relationship with nature, with spirituality. And, you and I are writers, right, Roger? So the cacophony, sorry, everybody, of the world was just so loud and noisy and overwhelming and pushing and driving. And it was very hard on my system. And also, this was a very key point in my personal spiritual experience, which was, I stayed very connected to my upbringing and my religious path of that time, well through college. I got married very young. I got married my senior year in college and moved directly from the dormitory into my new husband's house. So I had never lived alone. I'd never supported myself independently, never had my own apartment. I just moved from home to the college dorm to my husband's house. So there was, it was a lot of transitions and not a lot of learning about who I was individually and what I was supposed to do in the world. When that marriage tragically failed, then I really hit a wall because I was still practicing, still believing pretty much something of what I'd grown up with, light version of that. But there were some people, some leaders in my religious environment who didn't support the divorce, even though I was experiencing a lot of psychological abuse and a lot of other things I'm not going to talk about right now. Didn't support it, told me so, told me the only, and there was a lot of cheating and so forth involved as well, and told me that still the only answer was reconciliation according to the Bible. I had an intimate inner family member tell me that, well, I'm glad you're safe, but just so you know, you'll always be married to him in heaven. And some of you listening will relate to this depending on which background you come from. That was really hard because I was like, I felt like I lost what I thought was my soulmate. I felt like I lost my community. And there's a few of you who may be listening today who were my support, and thank God for you. I don't know what I would have done without you. But in general, really my community, leadership, family, it was so confusing because I grew up with this spiritual reality that if you did all the right things and checked all the right boxes, that everything would go perfectly. Like somehow you would have this magical life. So I really struggled through that. I struggled deeply to figure out who I was and what I was supposed to be doing in the world and where God fit in. I felt very abandoned by God, which many of you have probably experienced when you've gone through really rough patches. I also then went through a phase of chronic pain from back injuries and had several surgeries, and, just trying to kind of, surface and where is God in all this? And is life even worth living? It's so frustrating. And it's, I don't know the answers. Am I an atheist? Am I agnostic? Am I Christian? Am I not? Am I spiritual? Like, I don't even know, like, what do I even believe? And so when Roger and I, when we have conversations about what belief is and what that means, and when I read your book, Divine Destiny, I'm always super encouraged because it's, there's such an inclusive and warm space there for everyone to find their voice. So And to wrap up my story, more for another day, but my journey then took me later from other careers into Hollywood for 10 years, and met some incredible souls there who helped me see other ways of being spiritual, whether I was choosing to practice what they were or not. Really opened my eyes and showed me a lot of love in a way that I hadn't received that inclusivity from my own clan. And that was really special and a huge eye opener. It also opened my eyes to a lot of my own judgments about people and the things they do and what they believe. And, the divine really just led me through that, and to where I am now, which is I'm still seeking and finding every day. I'm still completely open. I'm so grateful for a beautiful, active, and abundant spiritual daily, hourly experience. And I'm excited to just talk and share more about that with you and with everyone who's coming on the show. So thanks for letting me share that, Roger.
I love that. And I have a question for you related to your story. So you mentioned a few times that you had lived the experience you lived with your family and in nature as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And then you reached a point where you embarked on a journey into the real world. Since then, through the spiritual practices you have, do you have a different vision of what is actually the real world for you? Like, have you gone back to now perceiving, those times in nature, that's the real world. And what I'm finding out otherwise might be just the reflection of an illusion. Just curious.
Okay, now we're going to have so much fun. Well, I moved back to nature.
And do you feel that's the real world for you?
It's weird because I also absolutely love people. Once I did come out into the real world, I fell in love with people and realized I'd been a social being that hadn't had the opportunity to exercise that all growing up until I was, after like 16. So I adore people, but I love both. I love being in the urban environment. I love being one-on-one with people. I love being in the room. And I love people. But for my soul piece, for me, the way I'm designed and wired, being in nature makes me transcendent. It's just the best. And the closer it is to my house, or right now I'm living right smack dab in the middle of it, where I can literally, look out and see deer walk by, or, just incredible. That really speaks to my soul. Every day I get to go out there and just be in it. And it's kind of like going back to the womb in a real weird way. Like there's a deep, deep sense of connectivity, even more than some of my biological connectivity to people. So it is beautiful. But that I now take as my, that's my 40 days. That's where I go to gear up to re-energize and then go back, whether I'm doing shows or retreats or workshops or working with people or speaking. And then I come just full. I get to bring that with me. And then, after a while I get a little burned out, I go back and stick my feet in the creek and I'm fine.
I have had a similar experience in that I used to separate my experience in meditation and in that spirit, what I feel is the spiritual realm, and then moving into trying to bring some of that into my day-to-day experiences, but not being too heavy-handed with any of it. And just recently, in the development of preparing for this show, I just felt such a clear message that I am to take that, what I'm doing on my own, the practices that have fed my soul, and just be that with other people. And the people who respond to it, it will help them. The people who don't, I'm not meant for, don't worry about it. They will find their own mentors. They will find their own guides. They will find their own students who need to learn from them. And that we're all interconnected, but we may not need each other all at the same time.
Yes. And that's so beautiful because, I always make the joke, one diet does not fit all. If anyone listening has not proved that already, then, right. So one social environment does not fit all. One spiritual environment or conversation does not fit all, or not at a certain time. I mean, I'm here in this moment in time, whatever that is, having this conversation with you that I couldn't have had 10 years ago. Or I couldn't have had as a teenager. Like I am in this space and time where this conversation is now real and applicable. So we hope that we can bring in other people to this conversation and other viewers to this conversation who resonate. And if you don't, it's fine. but we also hope you'll stick around. And, as time goes forward, we're going to have so many topics and so many guests and so many opportunities to just grow and share. And I think that was, I know for me, one of my really fundamental reasons as well for this show, which has been a while in the making. And that was creating community for those who want to be supportive spiritually, not tearing each other down, not proving someone right or wrong, but to be supportive and just know we're connected. Like the women who helped you, come into your publishing career and your authorship, and, didn't even know they were became a spiritual part of your journey. We're all here to support and love. We have so much more in common than we do that separates us. And, just focusing on that and focusing on the love, on the hope, on the joy is what makes me excited about what we get to share here.
And what really excites me, a bit of spiritual advice that I received long ago was simply just show up. I was feeling all this pressure to always deliver and, provide something positive and powerful and everything in every context. When I wrote, when I taught my high school students, when I taught at the college, when I was speaking, at public forums, at author conferences, I was putting so much pressure on myself. And I just received this very clear voice who told me, Roger, just show up. And things just started happening when I released the pressure of that. So when I invite people you're listening now or considering the possibility of sharing this show with other people, invite them just to show up and see what happens. And if something magical happens for you, fantastic. If it doesn't, then that's part of the journey. You learn what you do want by sifting out what is not a good fit for you at the time.
Absolutely. That's so true. And that's part of, what, even going back to the quote, because I know near the end of our shows, we're also bringing the quote back in, just, that's going to bookend us on our shows. And so we got to read an extra number of times today, which is wonderful. But that whole part of sharing, every person in your life represents a piece of your soul. This is the quote. And how you treat them is how you're treating your spirit. And that is by Roger. Every person in your life represents a piece of your soul, and how you treat them is how you're treating your spirit. So finding the people who need to have this conversation, who need to hear it, is amazing. Let's see, what else?
So let me share a little bit about the next show, if I may. Yeah.
Please.
So I'm excited about our next guest because she will be bringing a different quotation, of course, from someone very famous. And I'm excited about her because she, somewhat similar to you, but in a very different context, she grew up in a very religious environment. And then certain things happened in her early adulthood and then more recently where she had some spiritual revelations that made her want to reach higher and broader in the context of how she was learning about who she was as a spiritual being. And so next week, when she comes to talk to us, she's going to share a quotation, which is not a spiritual quotation. It is actually from literature. Beautiful. And then from there, she will tell us her journey. And that journey is all about broadening and heightening the possibilities for where we find spiritual fulfillment.
Amazing. I am so excited. I cannot wait to meet her and talk to her, and some of the other people that are getting booked and connected for the show, people that we are having conversations with. Right now, I'm in conversations with someone, an ex-Mormon bishop from New Zealand. I'm having conversations hopefully soon with possibly one of Dr. Montgomery's friends who is East Indian atheist, which is an unusual combination, and I think a really great conversation to have. Other people that have had an unusual or lifestyle or alternative experience that have really struggled in finding a way to stay spiritual against the kind of criticism for their lifestyle or their choices, but know that they deeply are spiritual people and that they want to belong and they want to contribute, they want to love, they want to give back and be part of that spiritual community. So you have a lot of people coming up soon that I just can't wait. I literally am so excited.
Me too.
I know. So any closing remarks that you have for our listeners today, specifically, Roger?
My recommendation to any listener is to trust your own journey. Trust wherever it's heading to for you. Whatever that is, trust it. You cannot make a wrong decision. Everything you do, every decision you make will either take you directly to where you're heading, or it will show you that's not the way to go. I can do better. But trust yourself, trust your soul. You have it in you already to be as fulfilled and complete as you always have sought to be. You already have it. You're already there. We just have to realize that. And that's what I believe our journey in this life is to realize the kingdom of heaven is within. We already have it. It's just a matter of exploring it in ourselves and reaching it.
Mm. Can I just sit in that for a moment? Okay, thank you, Roger. That's beautiful. Yes, and to piggyback on what you just said, and also, taking our life journeys and experiences and the ups and the downs and the challenges, I truly, truly believe that nothing is wasted. Doesn't mean that we would wish any of the negative things, we wish they didn't happen, perhaps, but nothing is ever wasted. So, pursuing your dream, pursuing your relationship with the divine or the spiritual, no matter where you've been or where you're going, it doesn't matter. All that matters is this present moment right now. And everything that's brought you here is not wasted. It's actually an incredible gift. And then I would like to invite everyone, please, to like and subscribe. Please follow the show. We are so excited to bring this to you, and we want to keep this content coming to you. When you can tune in live, we love that. Thank you for all of you who wrote us live messages today during the show. We encourage you to please come back, leave us more messages, ask questions. We can't wait to interact with you and get to know you better. You can follow the show here. You can like and subscribe for notifications when we're going live. And this is being recorded. So after the show, you can click on the link and watch it if you missed it, or if you want to watch it again, or if you'd like to share it with someone and you'd like to copy and paste that URL and share it with someone else. It's also on at least my social media and probably Roger's as well. So you could go to my Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and find the information or retweet, repost. We would be so grateful. So we both wish you an abundant and wonderful day, a wonderful week of spiritual joy and inclusivity. And we cannot wait to see you again next week at the same time, which is 12 noon Eastern, 9 Pacific live.
And as always, live the life you dream and trust your soul.
Thank you so much.